Yes, sir. I think we are good to go. So we are live on YouTube as well. All right. So good evening, everyone, and we have this very interesting session with us. So it's very rare that we get to interact with test conveners and get to discuss as to what is the philosophy behind the test and what exactly is it that people should be preparing for, what all are the skills tested, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of a one-off thing wherein we will also be looking at queries from the students and we'll try to understand more from sir as to what exactly goes behind the test. Right. So we have Dr. Rahul Kumar Shukla sir today with us. He is the convener for XAT 24, and he has an amazing pedigree as such. Right. He has been associated with universities including XLRI, IIM Kozhikode, Symbiosis International University, IMA. He's a PhD in English, a Fulbright scholar from the University of Pennsylvania, right? So we can have a session all together discussing your experiences, sir. But today we are here to discuss the XAT. Welcome, sir, to this session. I'm sure our all our students and aspirants will have a lot of clarity in terms of what to expect from the XAT 24 after this session. So, sir, to start with, XAT, to put it in a very unique way, it's a very brave test, right? So, I have appeared for the XAT myself, and it was sort of like the most interesting test of the season for me as well when I was an aspirant, maybe what 10, 12 years back. And there are a lot of things that make that different, right? So there is the duration of the test, which has more or less increased. So earlier it used to be a 2-hour test. It has kept on becoming longer. So in today's day and age, where the attention span is limited and tests are becoming shorter by the day, that has managed to be a 165, 170-minute kind of a test with an additional GK and essay section. There's a DM section that is there, right, which makes it very unique compared to other tests if we were to look at it. So overall, what are the broad areas that you would say are tested, and how would you sort of define the spirit of the test, the XAT as such, sir?
Okay, so thank you, Shashangi, for such a wonderful introduction. I really feel humbled and honored. And I welcome all the participants who are going to take XAT on January 7. I welcome to this webinar. So your question is very interesting, that what do we try to evaluate, right? Because you are talking about the uniqueness of our program. We have quantitative section, we have verbal ability section with logical reasoning. Then we have a decision-making section, which is quite unique. And then we also try to understand people on general knowledge and essay writing. So like the fundamental skills we try to understand in our candidates are, number one, we want our students to be analytical and critical in their thinking process. So when I say analytical, can they understand problems and can they arrive at problems even when they don't know, for instance, a formula to solve that problem, right? So it's not like that you have to always know the formula. Can you understand or create your processes based on your understanding and come up with something interesting and come up and arrive at a solution we look forward to? So do you know the application of what you have studied? Can you apply your knowledge? So that's where analytical skills come into picture. Then we also try to understand your verbal reasoning abilities.
Hmm.
If you have seen our question paper, even when we give, for instance, an RC in the form of a poem, we try to understand if you can handle a poem and argue on that poem logically. So if you look at our questions, they are logical in nature,
Right.
but you have to comment on a poem. So obviously, logical reasoning gets tested. Along with logical reasoning, we try to understand analytical skills of our candidates. Along with that, we also try to understand, do they have or can they actually use their verbal aptitude to solve, or the quantitative aptitude to solve verbal and quantitative problems. So aptitude gets tested, logical reasoning gets tested, right? Integrated reasoning gets tested. And the bottom line is we want our candidates to be analytical. So it's like like a holistic analysis of a candidate who would love to join either XLRI or other associate schools. Why do you test general knowledge? We definitely want candidates to be good with verbal aptitude or quantitative aptitude or decision-making skills. At the same time, we want students to be also aware of what's happening around. That's why we have told that we want you to be good at current affairs. That's why there are 15 current affairs questions. And we also want you to know what has happened around you in the past, or if you are also aware of what happened, for instance, in the world at large. And those facts or those data points are important, right? Something which is relevant.
Right.
Obviously, we want you to be aware of that. If somebody is good at verbal quantity quants, or for instance decision making, along with that, if that person is doing equally good in general knowledge, that person is actually a best candidate to run businesses. When it comes to our essay writing section, we try to understand that what you think, can you express it in the form of a writing? Right? Because writing actually is an outcome of your clear thinking.
Right.
Those who can write actually can think clearly. So if you are writing a comprehensive logical piece, obviously you have a clear thought process. And to be a decision maker, to run businesses, to become tomorrow the CEOs, you obviously need to have a very clear thinking process. So if you look at all the sections, there is an agenda or an underlying agenda across the sections to choose a candidate who is holistically suited or suitable for any of the roles they would love to take in future in the corporate world. That's the idea.
Right. So great. As in, so all these skills that are tested, of course, as you mentioned, the presence of a poem as such, having the critical thinking ability to write essays, and all those things, of course, differentiate the XAT from the other tests. I would like to talk about one thing that you mentioned. So XAT, of course, is conducted by XLRI for their BM, HRM programs, and also by associate colleges. So is there a way that the test differentiates between someone who is a BM aspirant and someone who is an HRM aspirant, or it's sort of like one thing wherein all the broad areas are tested and then the interview round will differentiate between these two aspirants?
So there are a few quick clarifications. Number one, XAT is not conducted by XLRI. XAT is conducted by XAMI institutes.
Okay.
Right? So XAMI is like, it's a Xavier Association of Management Institutes. Right. So it's their exam. When it comes to XAT, we design it for those who aspire to study in B schools.
Right.
So whether you choose tomorrow human resource management or strategic management or finance or operations, whatever area you want to choose, that is not getting tested in this test itself. So this test actually tries to understand your aptitude, which can help you in getting into a good B school. Right? When it comes to XLRI Jamshedpur, for choosing people for BM and HRM programs, there is a different process. We call it a GDPI process, right? So there's a group discussion followed by personal interviews. And in those personal interviews, obviously, we have two different types of interviews. For business management students, there's a different panel or different type of a panel. And then for human resource management, there's a different type of a panel. So for both business management program and human resource management program, there are PI processes. And in those PI processes, we try to understand if students can be suitable for a BM program or for an HRM program.
Okay, fair. And the interviews, of course, are like at a very deep level, right? So, of course, that comes at a much later point in time.
Yes.
But honestly speaking, from the experience that we have heard and from the experience of interview as well, as in they test you on a lot of different levels. So that is really interesting. You also mentioned the GK section, right? So someone has to be well read, someone has to be aware of what all are the goings on in the world around them to be a good manager, to grow to that CEO, CXO level, right? So in terms of GK section at the XAT, one thing that is consciously observed is that the percentile or the score of the GK section is not used while calculating the overall percentile. So a couple of questions in that regard. One, is it going to remain the same this year as well, wherein we will not be looking at that score and percentile when it comes to the final score and percentile? And two, at what point in time is it evaluated and how is it evaluated?
So general knowledge and essay, they are definitely not a part of percentile, and they will not be a part of percentile, right? When we share percentile, it is based on three sections only: decision making, quantitative aptitude, right, and the verbal section. Right. Now, when you are able to qualify for XLRI, right? When I say XLRI, that doesn't mean that you are selected. When you have been able to make it to our interview processes on the basis of your percentile, After that, these scores are, so for instance, the essay writing, and they get evaluated. Those who can make it, they get shortlisted. And then these sections are used once, for instance, you have been shortlisted and you have been invited. Now you have got a score for your interview process, right? Or the interview at the same time, your GD. So there's a particular score for your GD and interview processes. Once that score gets added to your percentile, there is a merit list which has been created based on like your other scores as well are added, but these three scores are important ones.
Right.
After that, to make a final merit, we bring in your general knowledge score and essay score. So, for instance, somebody is not so great in the merit list after GDPI processes. We add GK score and essay score so that the scores from general knowledge and essay can take them up in the merit list.
Okay.
But let me clarify, GK and essay, these two scores, they are only used for XLRI Jamshedpur and XLRI Delhi campuses. They are not used by our associate schools.
Okay. Well. So same thing. The next question was basically the evaluation of the essay. So what all parameters are we looking at? Because I just look at the topics. A recent change that has happened, right? So I think it happened last year, wherein we had 3 topics to choose from. Otherwise, there used to be one topic and people had to sort of write an essay on that one topic. So one change that I think is again helpful to a lot of aspirants, because then they get to express themselves after making the choice that, okay, this is what I need to choose and this is what I need to write an essay on. So that is one bit. But considering that, I look at the topic and I start writing or typing the essay almost immediately, right? What all will be the skills that you would say are broadly tested in terms of the essay, and how can people sort of align their thinking process, thought process, and do better at that section?
Okay, so how it works, I will tell you. So when we design topics, we definitely keep in mind that we are not testing the knowledge of our candidates. Right? Like, for instance, if I'm an IT graduate and something comes on how AI is going to change the world, obviously I have an upper hand because I would have studied about it, or it's my interest area. I would have read about it somewhere. So it gives me an advantage over others, or somebody who comes from, for instance, humanities background. So we definitely, when these topics are created, the idea is that nobody should get an upper hand. Everybody should have equal opportunities to write essays, right? So we will keep those topics which are mostly generic in nature. Anybody can attempt. I guess last year also we had such topics which normally people could attempt. Now, when you are attempting on those topics, you don't have to show off your knowledge. You have to show how you can structure your thoughts. Not necessarily you can bring in data on those points, because that's a very generic topic, or that's a topic you would have not studied much. But still, can you structure your thought process? Can you clearly express what you are thinking about the topic? And do you have a stand or a take on that topic? And whatever you are expressing, is there a clear transition from one idea to another idea? And is the entire piece coherent? Are the thoughts interconnected? If your piece is coherent, the transitioning of ideas is very smooth, ideas are connected, and all the ideas which have been presented by the participant or the writer, they are indicating the underlying theme, your essay is super amazing. And that is what we expect.
All right. And as in, is this checking or evaluation done at a manual level, or do you use software?
So we don't use any tool for, obviously GK is an MCQ thing, so it can be evaluated easily. But for essays, obviously we have a team which is trained. And my background is in communication. I teach leadership communication, strategic communication. So I myself, I was a part of the training process of people who sit for hours and hours evaluating these essays. So obviously, we actually have a team of people who go through the sheets. They have a template, they follow a template. We have standardized the process so that subjectivity doesn't creep in, right? And we follow a structured approach, and based on our template, we give grades or marks.
That's very interesting to hear. As in,
yes,
that every essay is gone through, and of course there are a set of parameters and everything. Great.
Obviously, yeah.
Okay. Also, in terms of now the core sections, so of course the section that makes that different from all the other tests, right? In terms of preparation or in terms of the experience, is the decision making section.
Correct.
Earlier, I believe some years ago, it used to be the analytical reasoning and decision making section, and there used to be. I remember at some point in time there used to be some logical reasoning puzzles that were also part of the section. It used to be what 50-50, I believe, at some point in time. But now, over the last few years, it has almost entirely migrated to the decision making part, right? And we see a lot of different sets that are there, a lot of different scenarios that are there. Really interesting section. So, how does one go about preparing for this section, and what exactly will be the insights that maybe as a convener you would get from someone's performance at this particular section?
So I completely agree with you. When this section was created, so it was started as a logical game section.
Hmm.
Right? So there were logical puzzles, and you had to solve those logical puzzles using your logical reasoning.
Hmm.
That was initially the idea. But later, as we learned in this process, we realized that it is better to give decisions which are more logical in nature over giving a logical puzzle, because there is not much of a learning in logical puzzles. So that is how we migrated to the decisions or the scenarios which we are giving in recent papers. The idea is, when we give a decision or a scenario, we want to understand that a candidate who is attempting those decisions, that person can that person understand his or her own process of decision making, right? Can he or she understand her biases? Can he or she differentiate herself from the person who is in a decision?
Hmm.
Can also think from the stakeholders involved in that decision?
Right.
Can that Is that person mindful of what information is given and what information is not given, what is relevant and what is not so relevant?
Hmm.
And based on his or her analysis, can that person prioritize the decision maker, the information, and then finally apply that on a particular alternative? So very difficult to game this section, because there is no hard and fast rule of solving decisions, because that's how life is. At the same time, if you have gone through our previous year's question papers, obviously it will give you an understanding of what kind of scenarios can come in the question papers,
Hmm.
right? At the same time, it doesn't ensure that you will get similar questions in future. So it's like whatever has come so far, you know about it. Now when you go to give a paper or to take this test, you start afresh, right? So think on the toes, try to connect the dots. If you can look at a problem from multiple perspectives, you can prioritize, you will be able to find the right answer.
Right. And that's so true. So in some of the questions, it's explicitly mentioned that you have to rank the decisions that are there in the order of, let's say, ethically the strongest to sort of the ethically, as in on that ethical scale, right? So you have to be very careful when you're reading questions. So a lot of clues are there in that as well. So yes, it's a wonderful section. And so outside of this conversation as well, it's really
But
nice to see.
one caution, that please don't stick to any specific framework, right? Normally I have come across this question in many forums wherever people called me to discuss this. They believe that, for instance, in decision making section, you have to stick to a very basic framework, that anything which is unethical is wrong and anything which is ethical is right. I would again say ethical is always right, there is no doubt about it. But you have to understand that maybe in a scenario where you are bringing in ethics is not needed at all.
Hmm.
Right. There are other data points which have to be used, but you rely on ethics and you choose a wrong answer, and you ignore those data points which would have guided you. So keep your ears and eyes open when you're reading your stem, your substems, and your question.
Well, regarding the next one, the quantitative aptitude section. So again, we have seen a very gradual change over the last few years. So earlier, again, XAT used to have these one or a couple of questions from slightly higher order math, say statistics or trigonometry, or those areas that used to be there. But last year, especially, we saw that XAT quant has become slightly manageable. So I would not say very easy as such, but manageable. People who have their basics in place obviously will be able to do well. So this year, especially with CAT becoming very difficult in terms of quant, a lot of aspirants are worried as to if that will follow the same, or if that will also be difficult. Not follow is the wrong word, but will also be difficult in terms of quant, or do people from all backgrounds have a chance of doing well at DQA section?
See, I guess for either our exam, XAT, or any other management entrance exam, right? There are lots of exams which are conducted across the country. We follow that there should be basic maths, right? When we talk about quantitative aptitude, basic aptitude, right? So it's not like we are asking, or our questions are, for instance, coming from, from very high level or very high standard, maths. When I say standard, I mean like it's not a math. It's not. These are not the questions which you need to you only learn about when you get into higher education, right? Basically, we are nearby 10th class or 10th standard maths, right? We try to make our questions around that. I guess most of the competitive exams stick to that idea. So I guess any entrance exam which has been created in India, they follow this guideline, or not guideline, an unsaid rule. And definitely the intention is never to make a difficult question paper. It's never an idea. Because if we are doing that, what are we trying to test? If our students are not picking a question to solve and they are just leaving it, then what is the point of giving that question? Right. So obviously, when you say that the quant section of XAT has become manageable, the idea was never to make it unmanageable. The idea was always to make it manageable.
Okay.
Always. Right. And we are still sticking to the same plan that we would try to keep our question paper manageable for our students. Our intention is never to make any section difficult. Right. We never try to, but we can only get to know whether the section is difficult or not after the exam. That only happens when you get to know how students are reacting, or they are behaving, or they are handling your questions, right? When you go through the data and you try to understand which questions were not touched, which questions were touched, right? So that you can only get to know after seeing the data. So I would say that it's never an intent to give a question paper which is very difficult, be it quant or verbal or decision making. I'm talking about that. I cannot talk about other exams because I'm not associated with them. At the same time, we also want students to have a particular understanding, right? So if you have seen our XAT overview 2024, which we have shared, we have very clearly told that these are the areas we try to target, right? Though they are very broad areas, but to understand what can come and what cannot come, you need to go through our previous year's question papers. That will give you an understanding of what is asked and what is not asked.
Right.
And it's never our belief that we should become the most difficult exam of India, right? Normally, lots of people label XAT as a difficult exam.
Right.
We never believe that XAT is a difficult exam. We believe XAT is a smart exam.
Yes.
And that is why we give you a lot of time. You think mostly questions are application based, mostly.
Right.
You think, you take your time and choose your answers smartly. You may call them difficult because you are forced to use your brain, but that's what is expected when you join a B school and tomorrow when you will join companies, right? You cannot use one formula for taking every decision in your company. You will have to keep changing your style or your parameters or few inputs, variables. That is what is expected. If you take this decision in a particular way across your career, then it is very easy to find your replacement. But
Right.
every time, if you have a unique solution, obviously you are a unique talent for a company.
Right. So very well said, sir. So that is exactly what the next bit was also about. So this is just one side of the entire. It's one piece of the entire puzzle, right? Just taking the test, right? Someone who aspires to be a good manager, a CEO, CXO, entrepreneur, whatever be the career path that someone might follow after their MBA. What do you think are the skills that are required? How can people maybe brush up on those skills throughout the entire journey, be it say the test, be it the interview round, be it during the B school, after the B school? So some things that people should keep in mind throughout their career.
So I will be very honest with you on this. There is no, again, there is no no formula.
Right.
Right. It depends upon how you present yourself during the present interview process. I'm talking of getting into a B school, huh?
Right.
And whatever you have done, can you talk about it clearly and help your evaluators understand that you can be a right talent
Hmm.
for the B school, and through B school you can actually go to a company and do wonders for them. All right. So for that, you have to be clear on what you have done. You have to do some analysis of, if on your CVs there are some spikes, you have to understand how you can talk about those spikes, right? If there is, for instance, an extracurricular activity or an extra academic activity, have you tried to understand what was your contribution? How did you work in that particular role? What were your unique responsibilities and how you contributed differently? If you can talk about that, that is what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in somebody who is a great debater, because almost every CV has the same kind of a skill that I'm a great debater.
Hmm.
But the person who says I'm a great debater, if that person can actually, for instance, he can or she can demonstrate, or if he or she can help us understand what does it mean to be a great debater, that can help us understand how this person can be useful for industry, right?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, we are the talent we are bringing to our B schools, the same talent companies are taking to their workplaces, right? And the same talent is actually helping companies to grow and evolve and change or expand. There are lots of things they are doing. So
Hmm.
in that case, if you can project yourself, or if you can show yourself as a unique profile, something unique you can do, contribute, obviously you are a right choice for any company or any B school.
Hmm.
Huh. If you are very generic, your profile is not very different, then it's very difficult to differentiate. So what would I do? I would come back and rely on something which is on your CV. Maybe I will go by your, you know, XAT score. That never happens at XLI, but I'm just giving you a random example. Or maybe I will go by your college, or I will go by your CQPI, or I will go by something which may help me understand that this person is different.
Hmm.
I would say that work on your CVs, whatever work you are doing. If you're a work person, go through your work experience, try to tease out what you did in your workplaces, write
Hmm.
down narratives around them so that you can talk about those things clearly. At the same time, if you are a person without work you have to go through the responsibilities. We call them POVs. If you have held any position of responsibility or responsibilities in your colleges, write about them. If you say, for instance, I was in digital marketing, you need to know what is digital marketing, otherwise don't use such terms in your CVs, right? So develop a clarity on what you did, how you did, right, and what unique perspective you brought when you were holding those positions. And if you can discuss them in detail, there are chances that you will make an impact.
Hmm. Hmm. Fair. Fair. Yeah.
Right.
So one last question from my side. Considering the scale at which that will be happening this year, right? So again, considering that because of the macroeconomic scenario, a lot of people are keen on taking entrance tests this year. So a general, as in if you look at the trend that we have seen, a lot of people are planning to appear for tests and pursue MBA in this season, right? So I'm sure that with the registration window getting extended for that, uh, operationally it might be much larger than what it used to be, right? So uh, are there any things differently that you have done this year in terms of handling the operational challenge that we might be facing this year?
So, obviously, the number is going to be on a higher side this time.
Mm.
Right? Uh, you can correlate it with the kind of things which are happening in the industry, but also we have put a lot of effort this year. We have tried to reach out to our students or the prospective students, and we have also tried to tell about what is that. We have tried to bust lots of myths which are around
Right.
that. Right? We have tried to convey right message. So number is going to be on a higher side this time, but we are in touch with the agency which helps us in conducting exam, and we are collecting information from different platforms on the exams which have already been conducted,
Mm.
and the kind of challenges candidates faced in those exams, right, or those tests. So we are trying to learn from those issues which have happened, and definitely we'll try to work on those issues so that the same issues don't happen in our exam. So that is what we are planning. We are currently in a planning phase. Tomorrow, our exams deadline is going to get closed. We will get to know the exact number tomorrow. And once the exact number is known to us, we will decide on how to go about the entire process.
Okay. Yes, so that was what I had from my side. There are a couple of questions that I got. It's a very short question, as in, so it's a very broad question as well. How to improve essay writing, and does the length of the essay has got any bearing on the outcome of the essay?
So when it comes to length, I would say length has a role to play, but length doesn't mean that you have to write a very long essay. But if you're writing an essay of 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, it doesn't make any sense. Because if there are 5 ideas put together and they are not connected, obviously it will not give you an advantage. So whatever you are writing, you are picking only 2 ideas, but those ideas are complete, where you have added some information you already knew, or you have added some you have added your opinion or some data from somewhere, and then you have tried to draw conclusion, and then you have connected this conclusion with the next idea or claim you have made, and again you have followed a process, and then finally you have concluded with both the ideas together. Then it is a complete essay. So the essay should look complete in itself. There should be nothing missing. My suggestion would be that you first write down the points you want to bring into your essay, then look for data or brainstorm on information you can add, logically arrange that information, and also provide a conclusion. Once you are done, please reread that essay at least for once. Because when you are in a flow, you keep writing lots of things. And because I have read essays, I have myself read essays written by students, and I see they keep writing and they don't care what they have done. And because they believe they are in a hurry, they finish. And when I read on this side their essays, I realize that they are just rambling. They are moving from one thought to another thought. It's just their thinking process. And that's what we are testing. So if there's no clarity in the thinking process, you are just rambling, then there is a problem. So you will lose. So better is you structure your thoughts first. What has to go in the essay, you jot down those points, and then create a coherent piece where everything is in place. And reread your essay once you're done, at least for once, so that you understand what are the gaps, or if there is any grammatical error or spelling error, or any idea which you have added is not making sense. You can actually tease that information out.
All right. Well, yeah. So, sir, that brings us to the end of this interaction. Any final words that the aspirant should keep in mind?
So the final words are, first thing is that don't go by what others say about your preparation or about the exam you are going to take. You know better than anybody else, right? If you are prepared and you believe you can crack, definitely you can crack, right? Identify your strengths, look for what you are good at, because you already know what you are good at, and what are your strengths, you know what you will do well in the paper, or what you can actually handle exceptionally well. What you cannot handle, you will have to put more time for it, so that also becomes equally good until the exam comes, right? So I would say that first you do self-evaluation, that your instructors, your mentors, your counselors, they will not be able to do. You will have to understand. If I say I'm good at, for instance, verbal, and my instructor is saying you're not good at verbal, obviously I will have to listen to my instructor, right? Because he has some objective tools. But if my instructor is saying you are good at verbal, and I believe I'm not good at verbal, then I will have to give a thought to it. Why am I not good at? So I would say that whether your instructor is saying, just give a thought and try to understand whether you're good or not, right? I'm saying, if you're preparing, definitely you have strength, or you know how to handle. At the same time, you also have to keep doing evaluation, but don't get very critical about yourself. Be kind to yourself, right? If you are solving mock tests, if you are going through previous year's papers, right, that will give you enough confidence. Don't experiment anything new in these, for instance, in this 1 month or in these 20 to 25 days. Whatever you know, try to stick to that plan. If there are certain areas which can be chiseled, pruned, can be made better, just work on them too. And be consistent in your preparation. If there's inconsistency, obviously it kind of impacts the tempo you have built so far. So stay consistent, keep your strengths on the back of your mind, because they are definitely there to help you. Whatever your weak areas are, keep putting efforts in those areas. Don't experiment with lots of new things, right? And stay consistent. I'm sure you all will be able to crack this ad, right? But one thing I would suggest you, it's not about that, it's about any other exam, right? We all succeed in exams and we all fail in exams, but that is never an end of the world, right? Life keeps giving us chances, so you can always stand and again fight back, right? So thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was a very good note to end this discussion on. So thank you, sir, again for being kind enough to interact with all the students. This has, I think, I have interacted with XAT Convener for the first time. Although we have these kind of interactions as a part of media and everything, but to interact with the students is a different thing altogether. So thank you, sir, for being a part of this session, and I hope all of the students that were attending this session would be able to learn a lot of lessons in terms of facing this at one, but also in terms of being successful in life in general as well. So thank you, sir. And on that note, I think we'll close the session.
Thank you, Shashangi. It was pleasure talking to you, and all the best to all the aspirants.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So we'll end the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.